Hello, my name is Sean,
And I'm Kellen.
and today we're here to discuss our experience at the No Kings rally protest. Exactly a week ago, almost the exact time, we interviewed attendees at the No Kings rally in downtown Orlando in front of City Hall. And we're here to discuss our experiences and some of the insights that we gained. We're joined by our colleagues, David Washington and Kevin.
Hello.
Hi.
Well, great. So Sean was out there. He had the audio, he had the microphone, and I was out there with the camera. We wanted to just initially just share the footage with you guys. But there was some settings turned on the camera that instead of being blurry when there was motion, because there was motion, we didn't have a stand, and people walked into me a weirdly high amount of times. Instead of being blurry, it was just filling in pixels, so it looks really weird. And I think with people with motion sickness, it would make them very uncomfortable. So rather than showing you the footage, we do have some of the audio. It was a very noisy event, as we'll discuss, but the audio that was still good enough to hear. A lot of people were going in laps in their cars. So there was like most of it took place on one side of the street, but then other parts of it took place on the other side of the street. And so there were cars that would go in the middle, honk. People would go out the windows. They would be shaking their signs and all that, which was very noisy and probably a little wasteful. As far as my experience goes, I didn't participate in many of the conversations. I think I only participated in two of them, which were the last two that we had. I was mostly there just trying to record, make sure audio worked, and all that good stuff, and observe. And kind of look visually. Um, from what I could tell, it was mostly fairly respectful. You saw a very good variety. Well, I should say a very wide variety of different. You saw a wide variety of different signs. Some that'd be very kind of basic, kind of like how you expect. A lot of them leaned into jokes. A lot of characters in costumes. It was very it was very social, and also demographically, it was also kind of skewed a little bit older. I think a little older than I expected, but in hindsight, I'm not too surprised looking back. But at the time, I certainly was. It was mostly older retired folks or people in their kind of middle aged. Maybe because it was in the morning, you didn't see a lot of young people there. There was actually a MAGA presence as well, and actually we did speak to them, and actually that was the last conversation we had. But you wouldn't have seen it from afar. The protesters actually put up a banner to block them, which was certainly a very interesting move. But overall, it was very interesting to see. Without further ado, we have some of the audio extracted. I worked to adjust it a little bit to make the background a little less obnoxious. But since I haven't heard these conversations, kind of a reaction to me as well. I do have pictures of the people. Starting us off, we have this fella. You have Sean there on the left, and then the fella on the right who's in the costume where it looks like he's riding a snail. And let's see what this conversation was like.
We're out here to cover your events. How are you guys doing?
Doing great.
So why are you out here today?
Well, we are out here with everybody else, making sure that our rights are protected.
So what is this costume? Tell me what it's about.
All right, so not too long ago, a gentleman in Seattle put on an inflatable frog.
Oh, sorry about that.
Really how ridiculous the current administration is and how ridiculous ICE and their behavior is. And from there, it kind of took off. Portland got weird. And it's just part of the protest now. You show them how ridiculous they are by wearing ridiculous costumes.
Okay. So you're making a mockery of, like, basically the mockery of the administration.
So, according to Mel Brooks, the best way to deal with Nazis is to make fun of them.
To make fun of them.
And that's what we are doing.
And who are the Nazis?
Well, Nazi at this point doesn't necessarily mean German, reading Mein Kampf. It's kind of taken an overwhelming generic for fascist. So someone could be in the model of a Mussolini sort of fascist, a Franco sort of fascist, or the MAGA fascism that is uniquely, unfortunately, the American form of fascism.
What's the most fascist thing about Trump?
Ooh, let's see. Attempts to control the media, the use of a paramilitary group to kind of, disappear people. That's a very fascist.
Disappear people? Who's disappearing?
Let's see, I can name one in particular out in Seattle. The house manager for a large theater was a brown person.
And that's from ICE?
That is ICE. He was thrown into a van. By the way, natural-born American citizen. So it had nothing to do with his immigration status. Didn't need one. He was born an American. He just happened to be brown in the wrong place. It took them about a week to find them and get him out.
Okay, thank you so much for speaking with me. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay, that was the first person we talked to. ICE was a running theme from what I saw, and Sean could probably expound on that more further because he actually had these conversations while I was on the outskirts. But ICE was a very consistent theme, as well as free speech. I think were the two most common themes that I saw.
There's a lot to uncover with that clip alone, and that was our first interview, I believe.
What is this about?
Right off to the start, ICE was definitely, and I expected that going into this, that ICE was going to be probably the most pertinent, most raised issue, and from our consensus it was, as well as freedom of speech, which is so ironic. They love, the protesters, to use the word fascist,
Yeah.
and I saw that everywhere on signs and in their speeches and what they were echoing throughout. They sort of disproved their own point by demonstrating, by gathering in such a large presence. I don't think a Nazi or a fascist would allow such large demonstrations across the country. If there's truly a fascist leader, a dictator, that's another word that they had used. I don't think that, they would have allowed that to happen and to go through. So the freedom of speech point, I don't know about that one. Using words like Nazi and fascist is quite heightened, and I did push back on that. I said, who are the Nazis? And he said, well, maybe not the ones, the connotation with Germany, but still, that word carries such a heavy history, of course, as we know. And talking about rhetoric, it can be quite dangerous, as we saw with Charlie Kirk, for instance. People labeled him as a Nazi, as him as a fascist, and we see what that resulted in, very tragically. And so these words carry meaning and impact and can radicalize people. And so I did see it was quite radical from this demonstration, and that was just the first one, and it only sort of echoed that or continued that rhetoric pattern, and the same words over again. And so that was quite, noticeable, as well as, again, with the ICE, a lot of these claims of disappearing people in ICE, these certain cases, they couldn't pinpoint an exact name, but in a lot of these cases, they're not being targeted. People are not being targeted for their race or for their skin color. And that's what a lot of these people implied, that these people, immigrants, are being targeted simply just because they are brown or black or from a country in South America or in Latin America. And in a lot of these cases, what the ICE agents do is that they will raid a facility or an area that is prone to trafficking or to smuggling of drugs and other illegal substances and items. And so a lot of these people do get caught up in that if they are in that place. He said, well, he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. That may very well be true, but it was not because he was brown. What the ICE agents did was, if they're in a raid, a facility, and I don't know exactly what he was referring to specifically. He didn't give the specifics on that, but a lot of these cases, that is what they do. And if you have your paperwork, if you are a legal citizen, then you're good, and there's nothing to worry about. And I think, that is so important to bring up, because a lot of the fear mongering, they say that Trump is a fear mongerer, but what I felt that they were doing by labeling people as Nazis and saying that brown people are being rounded up is just simply not true. And then also the point with the costumes, we noticed that right away, because I don't know if it was because it's the month of October, Halloween month, and it was some sort of celebration. So I was confused what all the costumes were about. And he mentioned something to the tune of it being a mockery. He's mocking the administration, so he will dress up in costume, and a lot of them did. And a lot of the costumes were totally irrelevant to Trump at all, or to America, or anything like that. I've seen people dress up as Trump before and have certain Trump caricatures, but this was just all types of costumes. And I also found that very interesting. A lot of the situation that they were echoing is that we're in such a dire point in our country that we have a fascist leader, but it was almost sort of something that was mocking it. Like, they didn't take it too seriously themselves either. And so I thought that was interesting. If we're truly under, a fascist administration, why are we dressing up as, children's costumes? I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, let me turn my camera back on. Expounding on the point about language a little bit, from a technical perspective, you can call somebody a person can be a fascist without being authoritarian, right? I think if of course, if you were to specifically use the language of like, authoritarian regime, like yeah, that would definitely not hold any water. I do think that when you use like the way I think most people like naturally associate authoritarianism with fascism, even though fascism's the ideological part, authoritarianism is the mechanism part. People just use them. People roll them into one, and I think the same thing would apply to these protesters. And yeah, if that's the way they're using the word, then they are being a little melodramatic, without a doubt. I also found the costume thing interesting as well. Um, Aside from the part where, hey, we got David Washington on the camera now. Um, Aside from just the part where he said, and then Portland got weird. I'm like, it's Portland, dude. Portland's a very interesting place. Things happen there. Things happen in Portland. That's just Portland. But I wish I got the angle of the costumes a little bit more, because yeah, I kind of see what you're saying, Sean, where it's like, okay, this might be a little bit unserious, right? You're dressing as, like, I mean, the example we just showed with the snail is one of the less weird examples. In
Yeah.
fact, like very
They
next,
progressively, get
yeah, the
more.
next two clips we show actually are both also of costumed folks, and they were much more interesting costumes. The costume thing, I wish I got a bit more about why it's a mockery. It's like, yeah, the administration's ridiculous, but Kevin.
Okay, I would like to comment on the costume thing because I think
Mhm.
I have a general understanding of why
Okay.
why that's taken off recently. So, when all these protests were first starting off, the big buzzword that was being regurgitated in like conservative spaces and conservative media was like the whole idea of like the Antifa militant. You heard about that a lot right now. You heard about it a lot after Charlie Kirk, like
Yeah.
this idea of like these scary like black bloc dressed, anarchist agitators. And I think like when that's the main media pitch from, the right wing space, that this with like the weird costumes and them making a mockery of it was kind of a fight against that, where it's like we're not
Mm.
going to give them what they want. We're not going to give them, you know, fear and anger and like hatred and like, I mean, not taking it seriously, but taking it to an extent of like legitimate, hardcore resistance to the powers that be, but like by taking a more like comedic approach to it as a way to
So,
show people that they're not dangerous and that they're not agitators and that
so
the president's wrong.
So you're just so you think they're trying to make themselves look less less intense, look
Well,
more
yeah,
casual.
I would say it's kind of like the, go back to like the 60s, for example. You have like the Malcolm X, like Black Power groups, and then you have like your Martin Luther King Jr., like, Christian demonstrators. And there's a difference in like they worked together and they were supporting the same general like principles, but the PR effect on like the masses as a whole was very different in both of those situations.
I see what you're saying.
I I just think that it just takes away from everything.
Yes.
The you know I've done protests. I've done protests going back to the first Gulf War, and we were out there in DC, hundreds of thousands strong, and it was just a lot of chants, more chants, and we pounded our fists and stuff like that. And years later, I mean, Jesus, 40 years later, I see this, and like it's a mockery of the generation that I saw that was out there, mostly out there, the Woodstock generation. And then also my generation when we protest against golf on the Gulf War 1 and 2. And I've done other demonstrations, but to show up in a costume like that, I can
Yeah.
understand dressing up as, say, I remember dressing up as Illinois Attorney General Roland Burris at the time, and we were protesting outside the Illinois um, Government Center downtown, the James Thompson Center downtown, which is now the Google headquarters. And we were protesting a incinerator that Waste Management had in a community that I grew up in that was causing a lot of cancer, and so allegedly, and so my group, we created a makeshift bed, and we had me as Roland Burris. We had someone dress up as a business person with a sign, around their neck saying, Waste Management. I had a sign around my neck that said Roland Burris, and someone else had a sign on their neck, big business or big polluters. And it's like we were literally saying in bed with polluters, Roland Burris. And I remember there were some folks who came to me and said, that ain't right, that's wrong. But it made an impression with people. We got it on the news, of course. I was interviewed by WBC, yay. But seeing these costumes and the effort to get into these inflatables, and it just took away from the seriousness that they were trying to convey, in my opinion, based on my experience.
Oh, yeah, I definitely agree with you, David, there. And Kevin, you raised an interesting point, and your perspective is definitely interesting. Um, I think, though, with the whole Antifa, we can't negate that either. There's definitely a presence there. Maybe not so much in Orlando or Florida
Yeah, there
specifically,
wasn't any
but
at this.
not here.
There
But
was
also,
none.
you have to take in consideration who's the leadership in Florida and how things run in Florida versus where something may run in Seattle or Portland, where certain crowds can act the way they wish. I also think it's to be interesting with the costumes. If it was sort of to be an icebreaker or to not have this scary, intimidating presence, which was also ironic because some of the costumes were not so welcoming or a little like off kilter, like they didn't make sense. You know what I mean? Like they just didn't make
Yeah.
sense.
It wasn't like David dressing up as the Attorney General. It was like
and
Shrek.
there were Shrek costumes, there were costumes. Some of them were quite vulgar, but it was
All the
also
signs were.
interesting. A lot of them didn't treat us with respect or have a certain levity to them that you would expect. So, for example, these beautiful people, and so it's interesting. I don't think the costumes really panned out in the way that they hoped it to be, and I think Kevin's your point is definitely um interesting. I just don't know if that really if that was their true objective and the point of their costumes. I personally just don't think it worked out. I don't think it came
Yeah.
to fruition the way they wanted it to be, and so it sent some conflicting messages, almost as if they were like making fun of the protesters themselves in a way, like the people who truly felt, you know,
Right.
a cause. It was almost like, oh, like this is just silly. Like we're here to fight fascism and no kings, and we're under attack from a king who wants to kill us all. But let's just dress up in Halloween costumes. And also these, and we noted before the demographic, a lot of older folks.
Yeah.
I would say boomer generation and up. Maybe some Gen X as
I would
well.
say Gen X and up.
But Gen
I
X,
think most of the costume folks,
but
I think all the costume folks that we saw were millennials, actually.
no,
No,
older than
actually, oh
millennials.
no.
No, that's
I-
right. No, there were a couple others.
I would say all of them were much older than millennials, at least in their 50s and 60s and 70s. I saw costumes like
I
that.
agree.
And so that was interesting. And then also noting on demographics, we're going to bring up the point of diversity. It in my, and just from what I viewed, because there were so many people there and it was quite vast, but again, just from my viewpoint, it wasn't that diverse, I feel. And for people who champion different voices, it just seems like a lot of older white boomers, but
It was.
Yeah,
that's just from
Yeah.
my
it
perspective.
was.
I think there are ways to make costumes work. This isn't a very good picture of it, but this lady here, she had, you know, her sign was a graveyard of all these things because she thinks that these things are, and we're gonna get to her, but she thinks that these 5 items are going downhill under the current administration, and she actually dressed up in a funeral. Like she dressed up like she was going to a funeral.
Mourning. She was in mourning.
Yes, she was in mourning, right? And I think that is a more sensible way to do a costume because it is directly related to the point that you're trying to get to. I think that, and I think dressing up in costumes is like I see what Kevin's point is, and I kind of see what their point is. You know, now that I've had it explained to me that okay, you want to show just how non-threatening you are. I don't know, I think there's smarter ways to do costumes, but not to harp on this point too much.
And also more self-respecting ways, you know, to sort of take some pride in yourself. And this is almost belittling yourself and your whole cause, and from
small way, yeah. Yeah, let's hear what the Shrek.
What is this costume about? You guys want to speak?
Sure. We're standing up for our son who is autistic, as well as us. We're a gay family.
Okay.
And you look fabulous, by the way.
Okay, and so you're dressed up as, I see, like different characters from the movie Shrek.
Yes. I'm just an ass trying to stand up against an ass.
Okay. What does Shrek have to do with like the No King's Day? I'm just curious. Like, is there any correlation there, or just like you like the movie?
No. Protecting the identity.
Oh, you're protecting your identities. Is there a reason why you want your identities to be protected?
Jobs. Workplace. The workplace.
Workplace? Oh, okay. Like workplace discrimination for you being out here.
Yep.
And you guys have your No King signs. Okay, well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
What is this?
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess they didn't want to be outed. Which I guess can also make sense. Okay, you want to maybe consider that. I mean, I don't think most employers would actually have a problem with anybody peacefully protesting, at least from what I would suspect.
Right.
Unless maybe they worked, and I mean, I don't remember if they expounded on to you at all, Sean. Maybe if they worked for like the state of Florida in some capacity, I could understand that.
Well, so the audio there was also very quiet. They were covered. And we also spoke sort of like off camera in just a bit. They worked in, I believe, the education sector. I don't know. I'm assuming that would be public education, could be private, but I'm assuming public, and I don't know if they were teachers or administrators, but regardless, they said they were tying in a lot of the identity. And of course, like a lot of this comes back to identity politics. And they had mentioned that they were a gay polyamorous
Maybe.
so
I'm
that they feared in the sense of, and they
maybe.
had a small child also off camera, and so it was just something where they raised these points of, we're fearful that we can't be out here, and then also other people echoing like the freedom of speech, like we have no freedom of speech in this country, and I think there's cases where you can point to that for sure, but just in the sheer fact of them demonstrating and gathering in such large capacity, which is their First Amendment right, and that should always be protected. I just don't know how that point really, adds up. Like, I mean, if a true fascist, of a true dictator, if a true king really hated the people in his country and was like, no, 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 like he would shut these protests down. But they were demonstrating, and it was peaceful.
Right.
And that is the right, and that's the way our country is. So I
I
don't
have
know
a
the point was being like, we can't be out here, like we're under attack.
I have a question, Sean. Were you able to see them under those costumes, or like their mouths or anything?
Yeah, they had like a little mesh maybe so they could breathe through, and I could see it was like two women and a male, I believe, and then a child.
I'll say I wonder because they said they were a gay family. They could be polyamorous, but I wonder if they were older ladies, if they just adopted very, very far apart. Or if that was or if they adopted, let's say the male.
No,
and
the
that
male was older. Like it was just a very sad situation. I
strange.
didn't really feel comfortable. They didn't feel comfortable, I don't think. So we sort of moved on after
That's
that.
interesting. That's
It was-
interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, bravo to them for, coming out and, getting all dressed up and being there. And I'm sure they want to protect their child and everything. It's the lifestyle that they chose to live, and I guess they do everything to protect their child from, any. I don't know. I'm treading in some deep waters here, but protecting their child from I guess the problems that they think their child would have based on their lifestyle.
It was just a sad situation. I felt bad for the child there. They were like young, and the situation kind of just felt a little off to me. So I sort of moved on after that. And a lot of the people were open to talk. A lot of the demonstrators were very open to talk. And so maybe a lot of the costumes were like more of like maybe they did feel that they were fearful for some reason. So that could be another reason to the costumes, but the costumes themselves were just sort of outlandish. Like they didn't really speak to me. And she mentioned that she dressed up as a donkey because the president's a donkey in another
But then
term.
what about the other two?
And the other two, I don't know. I guess they just went together. But
see, one of them is a gingerbread man because you can't catch them.
And
Shrek is because Trump looks like an ogre. I was hoping if they were going to say that they were while they're dressed as Shrek characters, why it was related. I was hoping they were going to call him Farquaad, but they didn't. That's what disappointed me.
I thought they would. Yeah, I thought they would.
That makes sense.
You're missing. Come on, that's the bit. Shrek stood against a king when it mattered. He stood against a king.
For Fiona, I mean, it was all about love. Fiona, I still don't see it.
It wasn't really political.
And what they miss is that they're dressing up for themselves, this crowd, but not for the people they want to change minds
or to represent. Even like
right. It just didn't. It just in my experience, it just didn't hit right. And then looking at their signs, like the woman who was mourning, the death of the Constitution, habeas corpus, and so forth and so on. It's like, well, not really. The Constitution is alive and well because you're out there protesting, exercising. One of the things that's on the tombstone, the death of freedom of speech. No, you're still able to, express, whatever without government interfering. It's just too over the top.
I think some specificity would go a long ways because if you're talking like all free speech, obviously not all free speech is dead. It's very obvious.
That's true.
But you see instances of the government being less free, which isn't to say no free, but less free, right? The we had a bunch of most major news sources are no longer going to be reporting directly out of the Pentagon, because the Pentagon required that if you had an office in the Pentagon and you were going to publish a story, that it had to get the check mark from Hegseth's office, and they were not okay with that, because it was like the government had to, give you permission to do it. Like, that's a good
And that's a
example,
violation.
and that happened. I think it was literally 2 days prior,
Right.
or to this demonstration. Like, that's a good example, right? That's the government, intentionally restricting a small aspect of the freedom of the press. And I think, instead of talking in such broad terms, if the goal was to, change minds, or even to call attention to issues, I think specificity would be nice. A lot of these things are very general. The most specific issues that I would see would be people saying that ICE has been detaining non-U.S. citizens. Today, I think it was earlier today, there's now 170 total confirmed reports of that. So it happens, but they wouldn't be that specific with it. And also, the only other issue I would see specifically brought up was that Trump probably had a relationship with Epstein. Those are the only two that you would consistently see where people were more specific about what they were talking about. Free speech, okay, what about free speech? Habeas corpus, what about habeas corpus? Right. Constitution, what parts of it? I felt like I wanted to learn more than I did about what specifically this administration has done,
because
they think is reprehensible.
This group speaks and acts in extremes. This is not the demonstrators that I was used to back in my day.
I don't make them like these.
Again, it's an older, wider crowd. And, just to qualify your statement about the U.S. citizens who were detained by ICE, 100, that's a handful in a larger pool. I think with these folks, they say, well, one person who's a U.S. citizen caught up in the ICE dragnet is one too many. However, we're not talking about a perfect system, and these kind of things are going to happen. However, it's a very, very small percentage. And right. This group and their supporters and advocates and allies take these small incidents that the media does, the legacy media does put out there, and just explodes it, just makes it appear like it's happening all the time. Like crime in Chicago. Oh my God, you hear nothing but crime in Chicago, when in fact it's just a very small percentage of individuals involved.
Chicago is actually in the safer half of cities in the U.S. It's in the safer half.
Yeah.
And it's so associated with violent crime.
But because of what is reported, we get this image in our heads that, Chicago is, dangerous.
Right.
No.
I'd like to respond to the whole idea that the whole idea of you have the free speech being suppressed, and then the obvious response is, oh, but you're protesting, so isn't that a contradiction? And I would say authoritarianism is like a sliding scale. You don't wake up one day and you have the God King of the universe as your leader. I have a lot of particular issues with the words fascist and Nazi, mostly semantics, because I'm a nerd like that. I would argue that there's very few actual regimes you could classify as fascist, and most of them are from the 1930s and that period of time. But I think if you look at the general trajectory of what Trump's support base is, who's funding him, who's involved in his administration, and the events of this term specifically, with a little bit in last term, I think there's definitely an understanding argument that he is an authoritarian and has those inclinations.
Yeah,
at the very
certainly
least.
more than some previous, certainly
And
more than
people-
some previous administrations. There was a sense of, I think, of being more hands-on is kind of what I got from Project 2025 and associated things. And that means the government, and that included issues, like speech, more hands-on with schools, things like that. So it was the government is more involved. That much was, I think, again, government being more involved can mean more democratic, can mean not democratic. That was without a doubt an understanding going into this whole thing. I think it would have been shocking if it wasn't.
That's just how the particular MAGA conservative movement of today is definitely much more governmentally involved and much more of a culture warrior type of organization like the Republican Party in like 1980 was.
I wouldn't argue against that. And your point of semantics, I don't think that a lot of the demonstrators there really care about the semantics of things, and so they'll just throw around these terms like that. And so then I'll speak in their terms as well to sort of have this conversation to meet them where they are. And so if we are going to talk about authoritarianism and fascism and dictators, I would say that the measures during COVID regarding vaccines, and if you didn't take a vaccine, you couldn't enter your workplace, you couldn't go to school, you couldn't go into public spaces. That to me, I think, is a large step on personal freedoms, and also regarding mask mandates and all of that, all of what we went through. And I think collectively there was so much trauma. So I think our country, a lot of people almost erase that out of their minds and sort of forgot that even happened. But that did happen, and that was, at least in our lifetime, the most like shocking like example of what I think is an infringement and totalitarianism. And in certain states it was different, but if you will point to places like California or New York, or
it was more aggressive. And I think to an extent,
none of the protesters there mentioned that.
I wouldn't expect them to.
We're here to protest,
of course,
at least some consistency, and they weren't. And they said, well, you know, that's okay, or they didn't want to talk about that one. But
either they didn't want to talk about it, or I think it's also worth noting that our country has expanded and contracted on its freedoms a number of times. I mean, think back to the Civil War. I mean, if you want to talk about authoritarian regime, the Union was more authoritarian than it had been probably at any point. But that was because they said, okay, we're doing this thing because, you know, our war is against other Americans, so we have to, you know, we're not taking as many chances as we used to. You'd see the same thing during wars, for example, like World War II, because of what was available. You know, there were a lot of local communities would have very stringent rules, things like that. During times of crisis, I think many people I think most Americans are understanding during times of crisis, steps have to be taken, or steps are taken, whether they literally have to be or not. Steps will be taken. That's a normal thing. I think a lot of people expect. I think a lot of what the disagreement, I think, originally arises as to whether the actions today are different than the actions of COVID, or whether they're two sides of the same coin, is whether either one or both of the situations actually constitute a crisis, right? Was COVID a severe enough crisis to justify it? Is illegal immigration a crisis that justifies, right? And I wish that's kind of a thing I would like to, that's kind of would be an interesting discussion. I have, like, what makes something a crisis versus not a crisis.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think COVID and that's a whole other discussion.
It's a can of worms.
I think sort of after, you know, a few years after it, you know, with a 99.9% survival rate or whatever it was, I mean, I just don't know. And there's a lot of discourse regarding the information that certain people had, higher ups that were concealing that information, then flip-flopping, and I don't know. It gets like very, you know, sticky. And then with the illegal immigration, you know, with certain crime rates and people dying, I mean, I think a lot of people are fearful, and so in different communities as well. It's not a race thing. It's not like this is a racist point of view. And today, I mean, or last week, I was hoping to speak to more diverse backgrounds, but we just didn't find that. But just from my own research and talking to other people, I've talked to people of all different backgrounds, all different communities, also immigrants, and they're also against illegal immigration. And so they fear that in their communities, it's harming their communities and taking resources away from their communities. And so I was hoping to sort of have that conversation as well. And it's quite pertinent in like other places like New York, where with shelters and so I was just hoping to have more of a deeper conversation, but a lot of the stuff that we touched on was very surface level. And I guess we left with more questions than we had originally gone in.
Yeah, I think so as well. I was utterly sick of it by the end, which is a segue to this fella who was in a otter costume. It was a little pun. Let me pull up the audio real quick. Let's do this.
We're out here to cover your event, and I see your amazing costume. Can you tell me what it's about?
I'm utterly sick of this president, so that's why I choose this costume.
And the president being Trump is the king, right?
Yes, absolutely.
What's the most king-like thing about Trump?
The fact that he thinks that gold and jewels and all this bedazzled bullshit is going to somehow make him better or make him more manly or make him more, I don't know, just whatever. And he's not. He just, it's a sign of weakness and a sign of impetus.
Do you think he's like a baby?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. 100%.
We're in front of the city hall. The mayor, talking about kings, has been in office for 23 years. Do you think that's a bit king-like?
I think that this mayor has done very well for this county and for this city. So as of this current moment, I have no issues with him. But I understand how politics needs to change, and he's getting some pushback from some mayoral candidates this time. So we'll see what happens.
And say if Trump were to somehow get a third term, right? Because he's a king, but he did such an amazing job, and like, would you be in support of that if he just turned things around?
Nope, not at all.
So who are you looking to for the next election?
Whoever we can provide that will kick Trump's ass.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay.
That was good, Sean. That was good.
I could get so much more pushback, but I was just like trying to keep it light and like.
Yeah.
We got Buddy Dyer's biggest fan.
Yeah, Buddy Dyer. I guess because something we talk about in J&W is that if you want to be involved in politics, it has to be more than just the federal. I mean, there's concurrences between federal and local, but they're different things as well. And in Orlando, the city of Orlando, there's been a mayor who's been in there for 23 years. And now he was elected in 2002. They used to be held on even number years. Now the elections for City Hall happen on off years only, and it's on its own ballot. It's not a holiday or anything, so there's also not that many voting places compared to a lot of other elections. I think I speak for J&W when we think that it's kind of that we believe it was a practice done to lower voter turnout. And in some of these elections, like some of these commissioner elections, near the majority or sometimes the majority of voters, because there's so few, can actually be working for the city of Orlando. So the city can almost elect itself, because these turnouts for these commissioner elections are well below 15% a lot of the time. That's how far 20. In the gutter they are. And I think it was interesting hearing this fellow, because I think when we think no King's Day, we're thinking no autocrat day. We don't want autocrats. We don't want one person with all the power perpetually. I think it was interesting this person focused so much on Trump's image, specifically the White House, which of course in the intervening time, the East Wing had just been demolished. If you look at the before and after, like pictures from previous presidencies in this one, you'll see that he has actually trimmed a lot of it in gold now, where before it wasn't. It's more opulent now than it was previously. And I think he was thinking very French monarchy kind of vibes from that. And I think that was interesting, because it's like, okay, some people, and I wonder if this is a clarity problem of the organizers' messaging, where some people are here because he acts like a king socially, and some people are here because he acts like a king politically. I think that was kind of an interesting double meaning or double interpretation that different people got. I think that was interesting.
Yeah, I think again, very surface level. I don't think Trump we know Trump. I mean, Trump has been
For
a
40 years.
personality since like the 80s, the 90s. I mean, he's known to have this certain um gravitas. I don't know, like a certain
Gravitas.
Yeah.
yeah
Yeah,
about
yeah,
him. I think that's a lot of the reason why people love him and also despise him. But I think people used to love him for that, regardless of all persuasions of who he was. And then as soon as he took office, it was different. I think that
He was
issue.
running.
I mean, I personally don't think that's the most important. Like oh, Trump is going to decorate in gold. Yes, I mean if he didn't, I'd be like surprised. Like,
Yeah.
but
the responses, like I talk to my mother a lot about politics because she's been involved, more than the average person, and it was her and my grandmother who actually got me really into it. And so when I talk to her, especially lately, I was like, Mom, if we're going to talk about politics, if we're going to talk about national politics, let's keep the feelings aside, particularly the feelings about Trump, because like with this gentleman, like what you all just said, it seems to be a conversation about how they feel about the man himself and not necessarily about the policy. And our conversations, I mean, it will delve into, a lot about, his characteristics as a man versus, okay, well, let's do a little policy dive here, Mom, or whoever I'm talking to. It's like, in larger scheme of things, Mom, you may not like the man. However, are you better off today than you were a year ago? And when you
Right.
break it down by data, by the
I'll
facts,
change things.
she'll say so. Now, granted, her dollars don't go as far as they used to when she travels out of the country, but
Right.
but not too many people are afford the opportunity to travel out of the company. That's something that she's been able to provide for my mom and dad, provide for themselves in a manner like that, to live that type of lifestyle so that they can travel overseas often. But however, I see a lot of the feelings, and it does. I've learned to be very patient and talking to people when they get into their feelings about the man himself and not necessarily the policy. And then going back, Sean, that was brilliant how you segue into the mayor of Orlando question. 23 years, 23 years. And I don't know who this gentleman is. I don't know if he even knows the name of the mayor. I don't think he mentioned the mayor's name. He did mention that the mayor has done well for Orlando and the county. I say,
The
hmm.
county.
Yeah, I'm
The
saying
county. That's the strange part.
I
And
don't think
also,
he knows. I don't
what
think he really knew
speaking
who
of,
the mayor
I
of
don't.
Orlando was.
Speaking of which, of like, I don't think he knows. I think he knows. I think he knows that Escamani is running for mayor. I don't think he knows that
Yes.
Dyer isn't running for mayor this time. He's you saying they're getting pushback, but Dyer isn't. The more candidates running isn't because Dyer's getting pushback. It's because Dyer has committed to not running again. That's why.
Right.
Right.
But he knows Escamani because that's that crowd. That's the
Right.
Escamani crowd.
Yeah.
And
And
so
actually, because the election is in 2027, Dyer will actually have been in office for 25 years when he leaves.
25
25
years.
years when he leaves, and that's
Wow.
crazy.
And a lot of the issues with Orlando that people are not talking about, because politics is always local, is that the homeless situation has grown
So bad.
exponentially under Dyer. The city is going broke. The city's infrastructure is getting older and older. And one of the reasons why they need to expand further out is
Because they're afraid
because
to renovate.
they don't have the money to renovate, and they need the new revenue from new subdivisions, new development to pay for the old infrastructure
Yeah,
here in the core of the city.
yeah. And the city has consistently not done what it needs to do as far as getting citizens involved. Because theoretically, you could raise more funds if you had a populace that was willing to pay for it. But I don't think the city's really put together a tremendous effort to figure out how to raise more funds and how to garner support from citizens. And when they do renovations, sometimes it does make the city worse. Like Ultimate I-4, a lot of pedestrian areas were destroyed to raise I-4 because they couldn't get the machines under, so they had to destroy these pedestrians, put up I-4, and then left nothing in its place. So a lot of times when they do renovate, the city also somehow ends up worse. And so it is important to, like, if you feel that national level, somebody like Trump is too authoritarian and or neglecting the needs of the citizens, whether you live in Orlando or whether you live anywhere else, ask yourself that same question, party alignment or not. Is my local government doing better? Right?
Agreed.
You know, sure, I really don't like the way, Trump is doing it. Is Dyer doing it better? Is DeSantis doing it better? Right? How, what about Orange County? What about Mayor Demings and company? How are they doing? You need to have that full kind of, it's important if you want to be really involved in politics and you want to be a good citizen. You have to compare. You have to see how it goes. And to your point about feelings, David, I think character is an aspect of the president open to critique, and this is of any president. I think a lot of times when we talk about like great presidents, a lot of times people talk about character. Like, why do people like Kennedy? It's because of the way he presented himself, the way he acted. So why do minus his wife?
Yeah, in public.
Minus the wife part. When people, a lot of times that takes a similar seat to policy. I think it's important to address that. And again, like when I was saying how there's kind of two different ideas of this rally. Do we want Trump to behave better, or do we want Trump to do politics differently? What's the more important priority here? Because even if you did like Trump, there could be a case made that maybe he should conduct himself differently. I think that would be a reasonable thing to potentially protest about. That'd be a reasonable thing to ask of your president. You don't like the way he runs X, Y, and Z. I think that's a reasonable thing to ask. But again, there was a little bit of it was a little bit muddy with this demonstration because it was unclear whether it was policy, whether it was character.
I think if the outcome of his policies were shit, then okay, you can add in the whole character issue. Poor character, poor policy, poor.
But that's like, but yeah, it's like higher on the pyramid. You kind of start from the foundations and work your way up.
Kevin,
is the policy sound first?
Kevin, did you have to say anything?
I was just going to mention how, like, I do think I agree with Kellen that there is an element of the character thing, and I think it's hard people ignore it because, like, Trump is such a divisive person, just inherently. Sure. Like, I mean, I was talking to my stepmom a couple weeks ago, and she's a Canadian national, but she is a permanent resident here, and she's hated Trump since the 80s. Like she had a view of him even when he was not political, and just couldn't stand it because of his personality and just his general demeanor. I mean, like, I would say it's not normal when your political leader has AI generated videos of like an Air Force plane dropping poop on protesters from the official accounts. Like, I do think there is a legitimate argument that even if you work on MAGA conservative, that you might support someone like JD Vance, who's a lot more like professional and can like have some dialogue with the other side and like can kind of pay lip service to like our general notions of respectability compared to someone that's just so abrasive like Trump is. But yeah, I do think it's a deflection. It's kind of a childish argument to make against him because like I would focus on the policy and like what it means for like our political sphere more than just he has a gold toilet or whatever.
I think that's ultimately more important as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that no Kings could have had more clarity of their mission or more clarity in their communications with their people about what they were protesting about.
Because with Kamala, even going back to the 2024 race, I feel like a lot of Republicans in MAGA's side were more critical of her policies and what she proposed as policies, or what she's
than her character.
Character. And her character was also something that a lot of people raised. I mean, brats and coconut trees. It was just a lot of unseriousness. And so that's another character. Just because Trump has a certain personality doesn't mean that another side, their personality is so much better. Politics brings a lot of different personalities. And a lot of people may argue in order to be a politician, you have to have some certain level of narcissism, or certain qualities that may be narcissistic just to have a charismatic presence. And Trump also captivates clearly millions and millions of Americans with his personality, and that's why they voted for him. So the personality thing and character thing really falls flat when it's like there's going to be critiques of any personality, and a lot of people who found Obama to be very professional and very presidential in his demeanor. A lot of people found him to be very, very fake and very showy, and so it goes either way. But so highlighting policy is the most important. And with the interview with when I raised with about the mayor, I could have, when David, you brought up the great points. I mean, Orlando are being such a great place, and so it's like I could have brought in those points up, but I could already just sense that this wasn't really going to go to that place. And when I tried to have I guess this is maybe, I don't know if this is in order or with the interviews, but I could just sense from some of them that they weren't even open to sort of having a back and forth. And
we have a great example of that later on.
And so I was just kind of letting them speak and interviewing, but I could have given more pushback if it was maybe a different setting. But I was sort of giving them the platform to let them.
And we got to the party a little bit late because we couldn't get our microphone to connect. So we were there kind of late to the party. So we were kind of, let's get this move on. But let's talk to some people that are not in costume for a change. These two were closer to the road. As I mentioned earlier, there was like that road where most of the protests happened on one side, but some of it happened on the other. So the audio here is a bit louder because of those cars who were doing the circuits and were honking their horns and all that. But hopefully we'll be able to understand most of them. I have to add subtitles in post. That sucks, but I'll live.
So we're here to cover your event. What brings you out today?
The situation in the country is very serious. We need to do something. We all need to get together and try to change racism, our Medicare, the war with the other country is crazy. We need to change.
What war are you referring to? The Israel-Palestine or Ukraine?
I am against what they did to Israel, but I don't think it's right. He kills so many people. Israel is still killing people. That's not right. They need to make peace and they need to work out with that. And Ukraine, I'm 100% Ukrainian, 100% with them.
Awesome. Were you aware that Trump recently was brokering a deal to bring peace, a ceasefire to the Middle East? And so we'll see if that actually goes into fruition and Israel follows. But Trump has actually already brought together 7 peace deals within his administration.
I don't give it credit to him.
Right.
I think it's the whole country don't give it credit to him because many people is working his back. That people deserve, not him.
So Trump could save the world, and it doesn't matter at the end of the day as long as he's in office.
Well, look, man.
He's not saving the world.
It's wonderful if Donald Trump would have saved the world, but that doesn't change the fact that he's a traitor, and he's a rapist, and he's a criminal, and he's a pedophile. None of that changes. Great, he did a good thing. One, he's still a rapist, he's still a traitor, and he's still a pedophile.
Open the file. Make it public the file.
Is that why he's not in jail for all those things that you mentioned?
So why he's not in jail? Weakness on the part of the Department of Justice. Timing, right?
Are you guys from the Central Florida area?
Yes.
Like originally?
Or you live here now?
Yes.
We're in front of the city hall with the mayor who's been in office for 23 years.
Oh, ridiculous.
Do you think that's a bit king-like too?
I don't know why there's not term limits on Dyer, but hey, man.
Yes, we need to have the power to change everything. Judges, government, we need to change everything. All the elections, nobody should be 100 years working like the Supreme Court. We need to change that.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
They actually had there was actually kids with you heard it kind of at the end. There was a group of I think 4 or 5 kids that were brought there with their families that had kettlebells.
That was good, Sean. That was a good interview.
Right by the end there.
Thank you.
I think we kind of see a similar thing of character, and I think the gentleman was under the belief that Sean was trying to justify any other actions he may or may not have done, some of which he's been convicted of, some of which has been dropped, some of which has been acted on.
I'm just,
But I don't really, but I think there is a possibility to separate the two. Like, you know,
I mean, the
I
Justice
would like if they
Trump.
focused
I mean,
more.
for so long,
I
so
wish they focused more.
I don't know.
Sean, you were saying, Sean, I didn't catch the first part.
I mean, right? The Justice Department was weaponized against Trump for how long, and all those trials. So, I mean, you can go back and forth of those cases and
Right.
and the details. And I was just like, okay, well, you know, that point is they're always going to bring up that point. He's
Your sign, you're mourning these various things.
I
I don't know why that happened.
I was interested when I did bring up with the mayor. They said that there should be term limits and that there should be change.
Mhm.
And I'm curious if they had voted for him in the past or not. But
Yeah.
we're gonna get there. But they did say that, you know, he shouldn't be in office for all these years, and we do need some change. And
You hear
I can
that word a
appreciate
lot. You hear change a lot. You know, there should be change. There should be change. And you know, his answer, he knew who Buddy Dyer was, and he kind of stumbled at first. But they go back to the whole change and the government, and people forget that, you know, their neighbors, their friends, their family members are the government, and it's just a matter of, you know, being involved in your civic, you know, duty and vote. And, you know, going back to the conversation we had about Buddy being to it be the elections moving from the midterm and presidential years to the off years, you know, that was purposely done. And with the next mayor, whoever that may be, I'm hoping that this will be a campaign issue on whether or not they would accept term limits. They were able to,
Yeah.
you know, move the election to the odd election years. They should be able to say, hey, we're going to just set ourselves term limits, whether it's commissioner or it's the mayor, for a certain amount of time. And the average tenure, I did the math, the average tenure of the city council members is about 14 years. 14 years.
It's quite a lot, and there is the argument against term limits that, you know, you only have so many people living in the city who actually want to do the job. But I do think it'd be worth asking, like, will they move the elections back to the midterms where they used to be? Because there you can actually get more turnout and get a more accurate representation of what the people want compared to, like, if 15% are voting, because they had to go so freaking far the way to do it. In term limits is an interesting one because you see both support and opposition to it on both ends of the political spectrum. There are Republicans who support it, Republicans who oppose it, Democrats who support it, Democrats who oppose it. It's like, it's probably one of the most, despite being such a prolific part of the conversation, it's probably the strangest part of the conversation because from what I've seen, neither party has in full dug in their heels on the issue when it comes to Congress, Senate, etc., etc. Go on, Kevin.
I think that raises an interesting question because, like you mentioned, that like obviously there are people on both sides that support term limits. I think the argument for term limits is more of like an elitism versus a populism thing.
Oh yeah,
Like
very
I would
much
say
so.
people that are more towards like the center. Like I'm gonna use like my mom, who's like she's unaffiliated but is like a moderate Republican essentially, and she probably wouldn't support term limits because she's relatively, you know, pro-establishment in her views. A lot of your like corporate Democrat types don't support term limits because they want to have their people in office. But when you
Right.
get to like the more like populist fringes of both those movements, whether you're talking to like the populist far left or you're talking to like, you know, conservative MAGA, you know, like the Marjorie Taylor Greene people, as opposed to like the JD Vance people, you know, that makes sense. But if you buy into that kind of you know, people versus the establishment versus the government versus the elite kind of framing, that's going to make you more skeptical of, people having power for long periods of time.
That's a good insight. That's a good insight. Yeah. There wasn't too, I don't think there's too terribly much to note with this one. Like the one we just looked at. They don't like him as a person. And they don't like what's been going on in Israel, which I guess, I mean, although we've been seeing actually a lot of progress like after that rally, and now we've seen a lot of progress there. We'll see if it holds. We all hope it does. Peace is good. We all like peace. Although it doesn't look like the Russia-Ukraine one is going anywhere in the immediate future, but we'll see how that one develops as well. Our next one is the mourner.
Freedom of speech, human rights. What is the worst mourning right now that we have?
My worst warning that I have right now is probably the use of ICE against our citizens, or well, our people trying to become citizens, and the unlawful detention.
What's the worst thing about ICE is that they're taking people who are trying to become citizens, you're saying?
No, ICE.
ICE, right.
Absolutely. Become citizens.
Should we do away with ICE completely? I hear some of that going around, that no more ICE, defund ICE, or what's the best way to go around that?
I don't have a best way to go around it. I think that it does not necessarily need to be completely defunded or abolished. I think that our administrations in the past have done everything lawfully to be able to lawfully deport people in the past, and I don't see why we need to be resorting to intimidation and violence, especially in places like immigration centers, courtrooms, where they're trying to go through lawful process of becoming legal citizens in the United States, and are not being afforded that right.
With the intimidation and violence, you're saying against the detention centers?
Correct. Against the undocumented immigrants, the immigrants. There's no need for violence towards those people in order to deport them.
Did you know that there's been a 2,000% increase in crimes and violent crimes against ICE agents, and against them they're having Molotov cocktails thrown at them, they're being attacked on the streets, the ICE agents. Are you against that as well?
I haven't seen actual evidence of this, other than people coming up to you and saying there's a 2,000% increase, compared to what? Compared to none?
And
never heard of any violence against ICE prior to ICE being a perpetual presence in the streets of America.
And they're hurting the immigrants who are coming here.
ICE is, yes.
ICE is. Okay, thank you. Hello.
Okay, so that's the end of that.
That was good. That was good.
I was gonna say that was a good line of questioning, Sean. I think there was a lot of conflating happening here, because there have been cases. You know, we said it earlier. There have been about 170 cases of U.S. citizens being detained. There's been a large number of cases of documented immigrants being detained and then later released. I think when she was talking about, like, you know, bad stories that happened in there, she referred to it as happening to undocumented immigrants trying to become citizens. Usually that's not the case unless there's an amnesty, because usually
asylum seekers.
What?
Or asylum seekers.
Right.
They would
exactly.
Yeah, that's obviously like a huge controversial thing. But
And with asylum, I'm pretty sure a lot of these people, if they claim like economic reasons for their asylum, that doesn't qualify as asylum status, right? Like I believe it would maybe persecution.
Yeah, I believe it's usually persecution or violence
Right.
are the reasons you seek
But
asylum.
seeking like economic advancements doesn't qualify. And in terms of the immigration process, I believe it's under Title 8 of the U.S. Code. I don't know the exact number, 135. I could be totally wrong. But there the process in which is being followed is lawful. I believe that if you do cross the border, you're illegally, you're committing that crime. It could be prosecuted as like at a federal level or
Yeah, it's
but
yeah, federal.
US does is that they sort of give a grace to that and then will prosecute it like civically. So then instead of like jailing them here, they will just deport you back. And so in that sense, they're following it lawfully. I don't know where they're talking about it's not lawful, and I mean, look at Obama and how many deportations he had. So you can bring that up. And again, with the number of legal citizens, being detained by ICE. With that, again, as I mentioned, with these cases with ICE, it's such a small percentage. And David, you said it's not a perfect system. And a lot of these cases, they will say it's because of your skin color or your nationality. It's not that when they go and raid a lot of these places that they've been investigating for fear of drugs or for trafficking or other nefarious reasons. These people are in that it's not like they're just saying, oh, like we're walking down the street and I see a brown person, I'm just gonna like, that's not, and the fear mongering behind that is so strong that people truly believe that because of their color of their skin or because they have an accent or something that they're going to be deported. And it's like, that's just not happening. And so with ICE agents, they are being attacked and they are being in their detention facilities. And there was actually a violent demonstration in which an illegal alien was killed at a detention facility by a leftist rioter trying to like shoot the ICE agents. And so I mean the actual illegal aliens who are dying at the hands of the people who are supposedly saying that we're here to save you. So it's like I don't a lot of these claims, it's like it's like this, oh, like, and again, a lot of white people were there, almost like this savior complex. Like I'm a white woman and I'm here to be like, it's
That's
okay.
a good point.
You know what I mean? It's like I just didn't see actually a lot of immigrants, and actually some of the people that we spoke to who had accents. I didn't see them mention anything about immigration or what they felt about that. I mean, maybe I don't know, but it was more of like this sort of complex that they had of like,
you got a lot of that. And again, I suspect that she's conflating two different news stories, because there have been cases. Again, these aren't things that happen at like proportionally large amounts. They happen. They just don't happen a lot. It's of people in centers, people who were documented, were there for paperwork reasons, and they got caught up. They were wrong place at the wrong time. They got caught up, or they were improperly suspected of being illegal when that wasn't the case. These things do happen. And when she was saying undocumented immigrants and trying to become citizens, I think she was conflating two separate news stories as being part of the same pattern, but they were. I think she was confusing those up a little bit, because I that's just a suspicion I have. I could be wrong, but that was the impression I got. But again, I got to give her credit. That was the one outfit that I saw that I actually thought was actually pretty good, even though her sign should have been.
But still, like mourning. I mean, are we actually mourning these things? Or are these things actually going away? I did see that, and I want to note my inspiration to do this was because of various political commentary figures, internet personalities who do these street type interviews throughout the country and in Central Florida, and the various protests in which they have gone and covered. And they had the No Kings Day, I believe a few months ago. This was like the second one. And they had similar where they dressed up like mourning, and again, a bunch of older people like lying on the side of the road in the dirt, like it was supposed to be like a cemetery. I think this happened in Lakeland, and I'm referring to Caitlin Bennett, who I love her content to watch as an inspiration to do these type of street interviews, and so I was hoping to have a similar fashion to that. We didn't get as heated, and our objective again was to let them have the platform to sort of voice their issues. But yeah, I did see those costumes before, so when I saw that, a lot of them come from different groups, and so they will come to these larger protests and rallies. Um, but yeah, I guess with her again, we're mourning, but I mean, we're out here today. It's a beautiful day. We're protesting here
It
today.
actually was a very nice day. It was a very nice day.
So, but
Again, I think there's something with the organization itself. Like, I think it was very broad. Like, it was so broad and unspecific with its focus that it brought in, everybody was kind of stitching together the messaging themselves. I think, and my personal theory is that the goal of this organization was just to turn out as many people as possible to make it a social, like other Americans like are against this administration. I think it was very social fabric, very undercurrent. I think that was the focus of the organizers above any specific issue. If this were about something more specific, like it was about ICE or conduct or wars or Epstein or something else,
Right.
I think a proper organization would actually would kind of have their own kind of literature guiding the protesters a little bit. Everybody can agree that an issue is bad, but how specifically you go about it, there is a disseminating factor there. And I don't think that was present here at all. And I think she's a good example of somebody who had a bunch of things she cared about, but ultimately had such limited direction in how to take it to No King's Day. And I think that's a failure on the organization for not helping their folks out. I mean, protests are also a good opportunity for education.
Right.
And
I follow the.
I think.
Go ahead, Kevin. You go.
Okay, thank you. I think that this is kind of an inherent concept with any like mass protest movement.
Sure.
Because you'll have protests that are small scale that are done by specific organizations that are very like centrally directed. Like it's one group. Like environmental protests are a good example of this, like Greenpeace or whatever. That a lot of those places they have very small amount of people and they have a very direct thing that they're addressing with their protest. And I'm going to compare No Kings to something like Occupy Wall Street or like the BLM movement, where there is a technical company that's running it. I mean, there was an organization called Black Lives Matter. There's an organization called No Kings, but there's also like a lot of people with their own very different ideologies and very different beliefs.
Yeah.
And different ways of seeing the world that are all under this one banner. Like I feel like people in a protest aren't going to be consistent with their messaging because they're not in the normal headspace. Like I can sit right here with the three of you on my computer screen and we can talk about things very respectfully, very like I'm not emotional at all. We can just talk about the issues and talk about the policy. But when you're in that environment where there's like loud noises, there's music, there's like pressure, there's some kind of a little element of fear. I mean, think about like Charlottesville and like Heather Heyer and like all the other violent events that have happened between like protesters and counter protesters and all that kind of stuff. Like, and even like the journalist aspect. Like, I'm not criticizing your journalism work at all, Sean, because I think you did a great job at asking like very hard hitting, like great journalistic questions. But I think I'm not going to assume anything, but it seems to me like you didn't have a very high opinion of this to begin with, that you don't have a particularly strong allegiance with their views. And I'm wondering if that might have colored how you came off to other people. Like if people saw you as like being aggressive when that maybe wasn't your intention.
I wonder.
No, I mean, I understand what you're saying. I mean, I would be lying if I said I didn't have my own biases. We all have our own biases.
Right.
But I feel, at least with my questions and my leading questions or my first question I would ask someone didn't have a bias to it. My objective was to go in it very fairly. And why are you here to protest? And a lot of the questions I could have given much more pushback, but that wasn't my goal here, and we didn't really have the time for that. We wanted to speak to more people, but if there was a certain question, I would sort of maybe play the other side just to have a sort of back and forth discourse. I think at least with my own physical demeanor and my own presence, I don't think I was intimidating. I was respectful. I mean, because we can't really say everything because the video as well, the audio may like sounds maybe whatever, but with the video, if someone didn't want to speak, we'd move on. So, and most of the people there, I would say out of everyone that we did speak with, besides one or two, we're very grateful for the interview and fine there afterwards. So I don't feel that they felt that my presence was something that was
Oh no.
preventing them. I just think they're not prepared regardless of who's
Right.
coming to interview. If it's someone exactly on their side and nodding yes, 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 which I was pretty close to doing actually. I wasn't really trying to give them so much trouble there. Or if it was someone like a Caitlin Bennett, for instance, that would have elicited a more extreme reaction. But
Yeah,
I just feel
more
like these people out here, and I would like to know. I mean, with the social gathering, I think it was largely a social presence for these people.
Right.
I did smell a certain substance in the air, so I don't know if there was a party element going on.
Marijuana.
There was just a lot of with something that they say is so dire, and like I would say, like I'm thinking like black clouds, like Armageddon, like like
Exactly.
like it is
Yes.
raining blood and locusts, and like people are dying on the streets. I mean, it seems most to me like a celebration, and that's fine if it is, if you feel that we can still have some like spirit to it, but the messaging was just kind of like clashing between the costumes and the people, and then with the messaging of like no kings, like we are under attack. It was just like, and I understand what you're saying, like there's different people of different ideologies under, I guess, this one umbrella, but these people, if they're coming to a protest, they really shouldn't need to be educated. Like, let's have a meeting before we go to the protest so we each have our talking points. Like, if this is something that's truly passionate to them and they're truly following the news and what's happening, they shouldn't need to be highly educated, like beforehand, like from a higher up. Like, it should be something that is almost intuitive. I don't know if you're coming to a protest, but
I think
my opinion, I don't know.
Yeah, I think something can be intuitive, but you would want to explain how you want to go about it, like more specifically this specific protest. But I do see what you mean. And actually, this next clip, this is going to be a really short one compared to most.
Kellen, before we go there, I just want to agree that this was performative. It was more of a social event. And again, with the young lady, I think she gets her news, her media from a few sources, and then also the backdrop of City Hall. Again, this is something I'll harp on until Buddy Dyer is gone. He's going to be there for nearly a quarter of a century, and that's longer than some kings and queens and emperors listed in the Bible. Right. So it's just the hypocrisy and just the animated, cartoonish presentation. I've always believed and was taught that demonstrations like these were not for the people demonstrating, but for the audience that you are wanting to attract eyes and ears to your message. This is a big fail, in my opinion.
Yeah, but it's way more individual.
And what do you think the other side is going to say? The MAGA conservatives. Do you think they're going to be like, "Oh wow, this is so enlightening"? This is only going to add more fuel to make fun of them and have these points and like little jabs, and so that wasn't our intention, of course, to go and like, but it's just like we were showcasing true journalism, actually, what we saw and just reporting on like the facts of it, and those were the facts.
Them's the facts. I was a staunch far right conservative, and then Donkey from Shrek showed me the light. So this will be a short one because this was kind of a case of somebody who didn't who kind of disengaged in the conversation all the way through. The reason we were interested was this sign was very strange to us. This is let me put up the audio. There it is. Video. There we go.
What brings you out here today?
Protesting for freedom of speech and our rights.
Can you tell me about your sign?
I think it's pretty clear. I mean, pretty clear.
But you're the one who made it.
No, I didn't make the picture. But, like I said, I don't
you for JD Vance for president?
No.
But you know, if he gets impeached, then JD Vance will be president, right?
What was that?
And then
I
so
didn't realize we were like filming. I thought that those were like, because I thought the camera was like cutting, so I was just like going along with it. But
no, we properly filmed there.
awesome.
And that was an interesting case because the front of the sign was grabbed by the Nussie, whatever that means. I don't actually know
what that means.
I don't know what that
does
means.
it mean?
I think I wish I knew.
YBN.
I wish I knew, but I'm not so sure about that.
They're
The
very
back of the
Wait,
sign-
I got a theory. I have a theory.
theory time with Kevin.
So can you put the picture up again? Or I mean, at least in
Yes,
post,
sir.
you can put the picture up. This is a complete like out there theory, but this pose is not like what Trump actually looks like. It's how Netanyahu looks at the camera. And maybe this is like a Netanyahu's like controlling Trump or whatever. That's my guess. That's the only thing I can think of. But he didn't mention that at all. He didn't mention anything about Israel
I wonder if
Palestine.
he
So I don't
knows.
know.
I mean,
He had
He
no
just picked this up.
signs that he would, but I mean, I get what you're saying, but he had no signs that he would be against
Or
Israel.
it's a typo. I mean, maybe that's all it is. Just didn't read his own sign.
You all are the PR, people, and you all know how important it is that you convey your message. And with these signs,
exactly.
I'm just in the costumes. I'm like, they need you to convey, their message appropriately.
And I'm the media. I'm out here to get your message out, and I'm asking you what your sign means, and you're telling me that you can read it. I'm like, well, did you make it? No, I didn't make it. Or is your check after you clock out after this the one who gave this to you? I mean, I'm just curious, and so I understand the reference, but I don't know why you would alter one letter out for the end to whatever that was.
Whatever that means.
And the back, and for the two folks on the call I didn't see, we'll show the audience. On the back, there was a second side of the sign that said "Impeach the Peach." Again, both these seem to be some kind of pun, like plays on his image. And it was actually because then Sean asked, like, if he was impeached, would you be happier if JD Vance was president? The person next to him after that was like, don't talk to him. Don't talk to him.
I mean,
this Sean guy, he's very mean.
Last time, I'm just like, it's the same talking points. I want to hear something new, something fresh, something exciting. It's like,
exactly.
Let's see if these two.
Oh wait, I don't know. What was this one?
I don't remember. I didn't hear it. I didn't listen to the audio either. Well, aside from like the few parts that I just like quickly doctored up.
What brings you guys out here today?
No Kings.
I'm here to cover your guys' event.
Oh, wow, we can't hear anything. Well, then never mind. They don't have anything.
Yeah, I didn't know because we were going around.
Kings, no fascists. We love America. Okay, and democracy. So Trump won the popular vote. Isn't that democracy, though?
No,
How is that not democracy?
because I think he cheated.
Oh, he cheated. Did Biden cheat? So it's only Trump cheats, but the Democrats don't cheat, right?
No, it's the swing states that the algorithm that Elon Musk bought, the voting tally. Yeah.
Okay.
What are you recording for? Is this a podcast?
Yeah, we're just like a political group, nonpartisan.
You're nonpartisan?
Yeah.
Why don't you move on?
Okay, we're just here for discourse. Thank you.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay. Let's set the record
insights, yeah.
clear. Regardless of the confirmed number, the actual number of confirmed number of voter frauds, there was a skosh more in the 2024 election in favor of the winner. A skosh more. But here's the thing: the fact on the 2020 and the 2024 are the same. The instances of voter fraud were not enough to have actually thrown the popular or the electoral vote. They weren't even remotely close on either Biden or Trump's count. Both elections were free and fair. These have been studied. Well, so 2020 election has been studied very thoroughly, and we've seen no reason to suspect the 2024 election.
I was just bringing up the point because
Yeah, no, and you were right to do it.
That's a very valid point.
Conspiracy theories and the conspiracy theories, and you're trying to steal democracy, and like, how dare you question the election? And now they're doing the same exact thing. I was
Yes,
Exactly.
exactly.
Right.
And that
Like,
that
yeah,
was
it's
that
the
was
same
something that
rhetoric
irritated me
here
too.
from a Trump supporter in like 2021. Like it's word for word exactly what those people
It
said.
sounded so
during
similar.
the whole country.
It was
Like,
the same
it's
thing,
just
but
baseless conspiracy nonsense.
It caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting to hear
Me
that,
neither.
you know. But wow, put on your tin hats, your tinfoil hats.
Yeah,
The
that's
algorithm, Elon Musk, the algorithm. Where
the
did that come
algorithm can
from?
influence an election, but it doesn't change the votes. You know what I mean? Like it's not cheating. It's campaigning. It's a
Exactly.
component of the media landscape. It doesn't really constitute cheating. I think it's a Mr. Fantastic level stretch to say that it is. That's that's kind of a very common of when the other side does it, I take issue. But
That interview was shocking. I would not have expected
Yeah.
To hear that from this crowd, and
know.
That worries me. That regardless of who wins, there's going to be this eroding of trust in our election system, and that worries me because again, this was fair and square. The media has reported, the facts are there, and for two adult, mature ladies to say differently has me concerned. From a crowd like this, it has me. It
Yeah.
has me concerned.
It has me concerned too, because it's like you got to be able to accept the reality of things when they happen. Not everything goes the way you want it to.
That's right.
I like for the record, like just speaking to me specifically, like I did vote for Harris. I did not want not specifically because I didn't want Donald Trump to win. But that doesn't change the fact that that was the outcome. He won the popular and the electoral vote, and he did it by a strong margin too. That's what the people voted for, regardless of whether I, Kellen Clark, personally wanted that. That's just the reality of the situation. And so that's why that's just very disappointing to hear that, because we need to be moving away from this way of thinking, this way of of being like so trusting in your side and always knowing foul play on the other. It's ridiculous.
Exactly. And that was a great point. What happened to when they go low, we go high? But now it seems like they're just resorting to other tactics that they criticize all of the time. And if they want to move towards this enlightened future, this progressive future, you would think that they would go away with that. Also, the point being, are kings elected? I mean, do we vote for kings, or are kings appointed? And who was appointed for the nomination? Harris. So it's like, the whole no kings, it's like maybe find another word for a king. And some of them say, well, we don't mean literally a king. And some of them believe, yes, he is a king. So it's like, even that they're not even uniform on.
So what do you mean?
What do we mean?
What is he?
When we use these words, and I understand we brought up the planet of semantics earlier, but especially in today's landscape, these words carry such heavy meaning, and they can result in real world consequences, like we see with the uptick of political violence, notably against the right. So because of the rhetoric coming from the left, and the radicalization of people in this country. So it's dangerous to talk like that.
Yeah. We talked to two more people after this. One of which we captured the audio of the bulk of our conversation. The other one we captured about half of it before we cut the camera, because we both saw the conversation going severely downhill. And our SD card was running out of space, and we thought, let's not waste it on this conversation. But I bring you two images. One of them is this. So this gentleman in the back here, to the back left of Sean,
Larry,
he approached us. He wasn't anywhere near us. He sought us out. And then later he did actually speak to us, and we do have the first half of the audio, but it didn't really get anywhere. And the conversation we had after, this was one of the only two that I participated in. It was a very upsetting conversation, to say the least, because I think he came over here with the expectation that we would record him, he would dismantle us like we were, that we were out there to, push an agenda, that he was going to dismantle us, and we were going to look like idiots in front of everybody. He even ended the conversation with it's your right to come out here, but you better do your homework. And I'm sure you're questioning, Kellen, what homework did he want you to do? Well, this is actually homework I have done. But he wanted the homework done on the presidency and nomination and eventual electoral defeat of Gerald Ford in the 70s. So, he basically went super hard in on Sean. Like, he was like, I'm just going to, like, he walked in with the assumption that both Sean and I were MAGA. I'm very much not. I definitely vote against that. That's not me. So, like, and he said it to my face too, that, like, that Sean and I needed to get our faction. I'm like, you were just talking with Sean. You're dragging me in. You're assuming everything about me. I think Sean, like, generally does good research, but you're just, like, assuming that, like, what he says, I think, like, that was very, very, that was kind of, I thought that was kind of mean. It's like, you're just assuming that that's how I am. And he was, like, trying to educate us on a Gerald Ford before I literally cut him off to just finish it off there. And he was nodding along with me. He's like, yeah. Because what the conversation that came up was about the nomination of Harris, because he brought up the claim that there was a very authoritarian way that Trump acts, and then he also brought in election claims a little bit, not as hard as the other two ladies we just heard last, but he brought in some electoral claims about the way that the Republicans run their party. And then Sean asked, like, whether it was the same thing or kind of different than what the Dems did when the delegates only nominated Kamala Harris for 2024. And he came out swinging like, well, nobody voted to make Gerald Ford president. And I'm like, well, yeah, well, you had Spiro Agnew resign. That was the vice president, Richard Nixon. Then because of the Constitution, by that point, you were required for the House to put in a UVP. They put in the Speaker of the House, Gerald Ford. Nixon resigns. That's how Ford becomes president, despite nobody voted for him. And he was nodding along. And then he's starting to quiz me. He's like, why did Spiro Agnew leave? Exactly. And I was like, I believe it was like corruption and mismanagement of money. He's like, it was tax evasion. I'm like, okay, so it was tax evasion. I was in the ballpark. The ballpark. It was money. I knew it was a money crime.
Semantics.
Who cares?
Exactly.
Why Spiro left is not relevant to Gerald. And then I was like, but the Constitution commanded Gerald to be president, like Ford to be president. There was no other option. And when it came to the nomination for the 1976 election, Gerald Ford had competitors. He had John Anderson. There was the Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
I believe Bob Dole. I think Bob Dole was in the primaries as well. He had real heavy-hitting competitors, and he won it out fairly. And then he ran the election. He lost, conceded, and that was all there was to it. It's a very different situation because with the case of Gerald Ford, you're asking what can be done. Only one thing. When you're asking in the case of the nomination of Harris, you're not asking whether they had the authority to nominate her. They could. It was whether they made the right call in doing that. And he skirted that conversation. He skirted that point entirely in favor of lecturing us about Spiro Agnew and then saying, it's your right to come out here, but you better get your facts straight. Not to mention when, he asked Sean specifically who he voted for. And then Sean pointed out that one of the issues he had going into the election was immigration. He was concerned about respect for the immigration system. And he comes out swinging, red hot iron in hand. Were you raped by an immigrant? Like, we're like, what?
No.
I mean, first off, you can be concerned about something without it directly ruining your goddamn life. But also, what if the answer is yes?
That's just terrible.
What if the answer is yes, sir? What if he was? You want him to come out here and tell you about his story? What if the answer is yes? And again, I think this guy was just out here making a ton of assumptions. He assumed why we were there. He assumed what Sean's back, and then Sean had to correct him that Sean was actually an immigrant because he said Sean was a natural born citizen. Didn't ask. He just said it.
He said you're like a privileged white boy in America and your family's lived here your entire lives. And so then I had that, which is not true. Like,
not true. That applies to me. It doesn't apply to Sean.
I immigrated here as myself too. But you know, at that point, the conversation became more personal, and that was not my intention. It was just one thing after another. We cut the camera, and there's no need to play the audio, but it was just, you know, at that point, I did feel like for my own sanity and stuff, I had to defend myself if you're going to make these claims against me and stuff.
And this group makes it personal. You know, whether it's Trump, the orange man, orange turd, you know, it's the insults towards the person, and the shaming towards the person. These arguments from this group, because I used to be a part of this group, it falls into these personal characteristics, and it's like you gotta say, wait a second, let's get back to the policy. Let's get back to the politics. Let's have that conversation that's tactful about the policy. Tell me, with facts, leave your feelings aside, what is it that you do not like? What is it that this government is preventing you in your circumstances from doing?
Yeah. And again, he just came in here, made a ton of assumptions, and then like basically then we left the conversation. He came here, he assumed that we were here to push a narrative. He was assumed that we were doing so dishonestly and that we were uneducated. He assumed that both Sean and I were of the exact same political ideology, or at very least close enough. He assumed Sean is a natural-born U.S. citizen who has never been raped by an immigrant. That he assumed that Sean also comes from a very privileged background. There was just so much, right? And then at the end he pulls the "do your homework." Well, you ask before you like immediately jump to conclusions. Do research on your subject before you come to a conclusion. Don't come to a conclusion and then ask the questions. This was the worst conversation we had by far. And I think Sean and I were both very disappointed in this. We had, again, I think you've heard it earlier on in the day, and there was a couple conversations we couldn't get because of audio issues. Most of the conversations were fine. Genuinely. I mean, most of them were, people like, we have concerns about, these things. I mean, whether we personally agree they're fine or not, that was what they were there for. They were there because they had concerns about something or because they wanted something to do. There wasn't this level of like baked in hostility, assumed sense of superiority, and also just patronizing tone. And this was definitely the low point of the rally for us.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to remove these things. There was one other conversation we had, and then there was something that happened after the conversation, or something I saw that I want to know. I don't have a picture of it. I'm so upset I don't. But let me pull up our reference image. It was a group I mentioned that was here at the very beginning. It was a group of Trump supporters. So they set up shop bright and early, right in the dead center of it. A bunch of banners were put up to block them. You couldn't see them from afar unless you literally went up to them. But they were there as well because what brought them out there, I think, was that they wanted to present an alternative point of view. So let's hear what they have to say.
Hey guys, would you like to come here to cover the events? And you guys are Trump supporters. Awesome to see you.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Just conservatives. Okay. I was curious to see if you guys would come out today just because of the crowd here. What brings you guys out here today?
I'm kind of here just to have some interesting conversations with people. Obviously, this is a big anti-Trump protest. I'm a conservative. I am also a Trump supporter. I voted for him. And so, yeah, I like having conversations, political conversations with people. Some I've had actually really, nice things where we've discussed a lot, agreed on some things, disagreed on other things. Some people haven't been so nice, but it is what it is.
Awesome. Yeah, have you had a similar experience, any conversations?
Yeah, we have a lot of people that want to yell and don't listen. listen, but at the same time, the majority of people are here to have civil conversations with us, and we've actually found some common ground as well, and I think that's a beautiful thing. I think that's what Charlie would have wanted, and I'm glad that we're living it out.
That's awesome. And
what about you? Are you having a good time?
I am.
It's a beautiful day.
It is. It's actually very nice here today. Some people are a bit difficult to talk to. You talk about common ground. What was the common ground that you found? Was there a particular issue?
Sure, absolutely. A lot of people are under the impression we don't believe in trans rights. We believe they should have the rights as everyone else, but we should keep men out of women's sports, and also at the same time, like, you shouldn't be able to force someone to call you anything. If someone called me a woman, I wouldn't be offended at all.
Okay. What about you?
Some of the discussions I had, a lot was on immigration. So some of the things I was able to agree on some people is that we should have a secure border. You know, we shouldn't just have millions of people pouring over the border. So that's a good thing to agree on. We also agree, I think the legal process should be reformed so it's easier for legal immigrants to have a pathway to citizenship.
Interesting. I did bring up that point, and some people here today said that it doesn't even matter that it's Trump. He can save, so one person, a quote said, he can save the world, it doesn't matter, we need him out. What do you think about that? I mean, some people will never be happy, I guess.
Absolutely. I mean, in 3 years, they don't have to worry about that. They can try again, put up a better candidate. The reason they lost is wholly their fault. The only person that could ever beat Trump was Joe Biden, and he wasn't in the right headspace. They put up a poor candidate when they had plenty of ones that could have done better. I believe Gavin Newsom, especially Bernie Sanders, would have given Trump a run for his money. However, they failed the party. They went with the establishment, and that's why they lost.
And we're also here covering Central Florida because we are here in downtown Orlando in front of the City Hall, and the mayor has been in office for 23 years now. That's a bit king-like to me. For people who want change, I mean, would you recommend to get him out, to vote him out?
I just moved here for school, so I've been here 2-3 months, so I can't speak on the local politics of Orlando.
I would say I'm 100% in favor of term limits in every office.
Awesome. And finally, so you mentioned Charlie Kirk, and what's the most important thing? What was lesson that you got from him, and the reason you're out here because of him? What brings you out in relation to Charlie?
Mainly, a lot of people have been petrified for having conservative views after Charlie was assassinated in cold blood in the Utah University. But if we don't show up, they'll just make them think that they've won, and we will never find common ground. We got to keep trying to talk and find some in the middle points to agree on. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, we had a longer conversation. Let me pull. We had a longer conversation with these gentlemen since they're the only ones with that point of view that were there. So we thought we'd get a longer take with them. And I think what they point out is very important. That it's important to find common ground, right? There are definite differences, right, between your liberals and your conservatives. There are definitely differences, but there's also a lot of common ground and also potentially policy points where maybe neither gets everything they want, but they can at least get something that they can both agree on, right? I think that's something we miss a lot. It has to be all or nothing, whether it's in legislatures or it's in county commissions. It's very much an all or nothing type of deal with a lot of politics these days, when the reality is you can build legislation on top of other legislation, action on top of previous action. You can kind of get somewhere. And I appreciate that they allude to the fact, something I found a little amusing. It's not a problem of him to do this, but it was certainly curious. The fellow at the beginning, when Sean asked, "Are you all Trump supporters?" The person who said not necessarily, who jumped in to say not necessarily, is the dude on the left wearing the "Make America Great Again" hat with the sign that says "Trump loves you" behind. I guess not necessarily, but
I thought
it'd be kind of raw. I think it'd be a little raw to presume otherwise.
Wait, was that or one of them? Again? They were a libertarian, I believe. I think that was.
Oh, right, they did have a libertarian with them. That makes more sense. It was just funny coming from him.
I want to comment on the sign too, because I think this is it's a very interesting sign.
Yeah.
Um,
I think so too.
so, okay, I want to say, first of all, these guys seem very respectful, and I think that they're definitely the kind of people I would like to debate as someone who's more on the left. Like, I would love to talk to these guys and just like talk and see where the common ground can be found.
Mhm.
Um, the sign, though, so a lot of people that are Trump supporters, and this is not by any means like a fact, but they do tend to be more religious. They tend to be more religious and more Christian. So, and then the terminology "Trump loves you" is either in complete accidental allusion or it's intentionally a reference to the phrase "Jesus loves you." And especially given that this is a No Kings protest, and you know the general line, I guess, that like if I was religious, that I would use is like, Christ is king, Christ is Lord, not not Trump. It's kind of an ironic thing where you're kind of like substituting, you know, your religious savior for Trump in a way
That's
when you're
interesting.
at this event to kind of like, dispel rumors that he's a king, but you're putting him at the position of a king. If that
That's
makes sense.
interesting. I hope that's not an allusion to that, because yeah, that would be very ironic.
That'd be really
I,
weird. Yeah.
that wasn't the impression that I got, like because I mean, again, we're reading this, we don't know exactly what subtext or ideas the person who wrote the sign had. The idea that I had was, I think they were under the impression that these folks find Trump hateful, or they think that Trump would never love them. So he's saying that, like, Trump cares about all Americans, or that,
Okay.
the Trump crowd doesn't just care about one corner, I think is the message he was trying to get around. Again, as I will also harp on terminology a little bit. If you are referring to an individual, if you're referring to kind of two individuals, like one individual loves the other individual, when the reality is they don't know each other, I feel like that is a little melodramatic. But I do get the idea, again, presuming that they
Yeah.
weren't making the illusion that Kevin potentially saw there.
I think it's just like a little bit of PR blunder, like on their
Well,
like.
yeah, kind of
If I was
similar.
advising them, I would not use that terminology.
Yeah, I would say something like MAGA for all Americans or something like that.
I think, and I understand all the points. I think maybe we are reading a little bit too much into the sign. Remember the signs that the other people had are all attention grabbing. So since there's such a small group, there was maybe 10 of them. I think they were partnered with university, maybe I believe UCF, and had their own maybe Turning Point chapter or conservative student organization, and they had some of their members there in presence. So it's maybe about 10, 12 of them at most. If this small little sign, maybe is their most way to get attention, along with the red hats, of course. They were the most respectful people that I spoke to the entire duration of the protest, which I would like to note. A lot of the protesters at No Kings were saying how Trump supporters are so violent and so hateful and just so, evil. And I thought it was funny because the first issue he brings up is trans rights. He's like, I'm not against trans rights. And the other guy is like, I'm not against immigration. I'm just for legal immigration. And those are both very moderate. One of them, I mean, if you're saying I'm okay with trans rights, just not men and women's sports, those are very moderate, very even kill, even like more like moderate Democrat positions to hold if we go a few years back, a few decades back. So it's like they're not even, and same with Charlie Kirk, these are very moderate conservatives. So the point being of like, we're up against these like evil fascist people. It's like these people are just very average in their points of view. They did not raise anything that was considered far or extreme. And the reason that we had noticed them, because they were so small, there was like a little alcove, like it was like a curvature, and then we were kind of meandering through everything. One of the No Kings protesters was like standing on some, like, I don't know if it was a bench or some elevated surf.
It was a curb.
Yeah, but it was elevated, so he was like higher than the Trump supporters who were there, and he was shouting at them, and it looked like he was about to throw something, and so that caught my attention. I was like, "What is he doing?" So when we went over there, and then when we spoke to the Trump supporters or conservatives, we'll call them conservatives because they said that not all of them were Trump
Right.
supporters.
Right. One of them doesn't fall into that category.
Yeah, the conservatives who were there, they said that the No Kings protesters were trying to attack them. So the only violence and aggressiveness and hatefulness that I saw was coming from the No Kings protesters.
Yeah.
As soon
There
as
you
there
go.
was someone who disagrees with them, because the Trump and the conservatives went there with to have a discourse, to have a dialogue, and they said they had some great conversations, and they had conversations that were not so great, just like in our experience. And so I think a lot of the work that has to be done internally. If your messaging is one about inclusivity and against hatred, and you're saying that this side is so hateful and all the people who support that king is so hateful, but you act in a way that is the total antithesis of that. I mean, it's like if we're talking about a PR standpoint and what that looks like from messaging, it's not a good sight. And so it does show how far left and how far people are in extreme in their rhetoric and in their actions than from protests that we had mentioned back, Gulf War protests or back during the civil rights era. So
yeah. To rapid fire a few good points, or rather just a few points of mine. I don't know if they're good. We'll see. Having one libertarian who was willing to go with the Trump crowd, even though he may or may not agree with the Trump crowd, or she, I don't actually know their gender.
No, it was the two
Wasn't
guys.
it he?
I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
they were guys. I can say he. I can say he and they. I can say that. They making an alliance with people, even if you don't fully agree on them, coalition building is a key political skill. In fact,
Yes.
many governments of the world, anything with a parliamentary system or a multi-party system, aka not a two-party system, without coalition building, they literally don't work. I mean, if you look at Belgium's a good example. Belgium struggles to form governments because there's so many parties and they will not partner with each other, so they struggle to form a government that can actually do things. And I think that is smart of the libertarians, because the Libertarian Party, it's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. I don't think they've been very inconsistent with their track record. So finding allies, even if you don't agree with everything, is still a smart route to take. And I also am not surprised that the MAGA supporters, the conservatives, enjoyed the camera and were nicest to the camera the most, because I think they were the one group there that was really looking to talk to a camera, not just be seen by a camera. I think a lot of the other groups, they wouldn't mind if a camera sees them, but I don't think many of them were going there to talk. I think because they were going there to talk and they had been talking all day, I think they welcomed us in a sense, in a way that the others naturally wouldn't have as much of a desire for. So I think that was, I think that made a lot of sense to me. Whoops. One other thing, this was something that happened as we left. It was a sign. So I wish I had already put the camera away. There was a sign that said, we need to be less like 1930s Germany and more like, I think it was 1789 France. I was like, you don't mean that.
That's a pretty spicy take.
It's like, you don't mean that. Robespierre was.
Give our audience some reference here. Give our audience some reference here. Germany, France, in those time frames. Give us some.
1930s Germany is Nazi Germany. That is Hitler consolidating power and doing his early occupations in Europe prior to World War II breaking out proper. 1789 France, I believe it was 1789, was the year they said on the sign, was in reference to the French Revolution, where they overthrew a monarchy. Now they were saying that, I presume, because of No King's Day, right? They were overthrowing the monarch. But if you know anything about the French Revolution, first off, you'll know it ended back in a monarch because Napoleon took over. But the more important thing to note is that government was hysterical. It was authoritarian and it was violent, even more so than the government that came before and after. The regime when Robespierre, who was the primary person you would associate with the French Revolution, he was the single dictator in power for the longest, was in power. You said something mean to the guillotine. They would do hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Parisians over nothing. sometimes they would even, they were a lot of them were under the thumb of somebody who wrote newspapers out of his bathtub. Only the best sources. It was this guy who wrote in his bathtub because he had a skin condition, and he would often say, we just need to kill more people to build more purity. Terror will bring order. This was the actual thing. They call it the Great Terror. They thought terror would bring order, and so they terrorized their citizens. They would kill just a certain number of citizens just to meet a quota. That
Jesus.
government is the absolute thing you should not aspire to be. I don't think, as far as historical value is concerned, morally speaking, I mean,
Uh-oh.
Well,
He'll bounce back. Hey, Kevin
okay.
makes a good point.
Kellen, okay. So what I want to comment on is that I don't think the person that made that sign has any idea about the like specific dates of this. I think they were very much implying that like the Great Terror was a good thing. We need to do that. But technically, in 1789, the government that replaced the monarchy was actually like a liberal constitutional monarchy for like 2 years, and then Robespierre took over in 1792. But I don't think the nuance of that is what they were aiming for. That this person isn't looking for like a moderate republic; they're looking for violence. That was definitely the implication of that message.
Sure.
And I'm not surprised at all. I mean, Trump, the attempts on Trump's life and the assassination of Charlie Kirk and the violence that we see, I truly believe that there's a certain segment of these people who hold hatred and violence in their hearts. So I'm honestly not surprised by that message right there.
I think it also says a lot of people here in America aren't too studied on their history.
yeah, French Revolution is what we're not trying to achieve. That
Yeah.
was a disaster, in many ways, many respects. Long term, it did some things that and resulted in good things because of how it influenced Napoleon and beyond. It did some things as far as like the value of civil liberties, but the actual government that arose from the French Revolution was screwed up, to put it extremely lightly. And that message kind of flabbergasted me. I was just like, you don't mean that. Surely you don't mean that. Surely you don't mean that.
They just don't know.
I don't think, and that was the other thing. I was like, oh, they don't know what happened in the French Revolution, do they?
Nope. No.
At least they know what happened in Nazi Germany. They're halfway there.
Yeah. So, is that it? Is that all of the?
Yeah, that is all the footage we had, and I think you kind of got an impression of what Sean and I's experience there was like, kind of what takeaways we had. I think we had a lot of interesting conversation. We had nearly 2 hours, over 2 hours of interesting conversation, actually.
Right. Should we give our final thoughts? To start with Kevin, myself, then
yes,
you,
absolutely.
Kellen, and Sean.
Oh, we're starting with me first.
Yeah.
So my final thoughts on what exactly, like on the event or just like my
whatever you want.
commentary on the.
Whatever you want.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think as someone that's definitely like ideologically speaking aligned with the No Kings idea, I think we need to do better, and this is a good example of why we need to do better. Like I think the combination of there's some people are committing to a more like hardcore stance, as we just mentioned, without really understanding what the implications of that would mean for like on a large scale. And then some people aren't doing enough. Like some people, there's this kind of like, I think it's like the liberal versus leftist divide you're starting to see a lot now, where like the younger, more populist left versus like the establishment liberals, but they're both anti-Trump and they're both like part of the No Kings movement. But there's clear issues with both sides of like this interfactional divide that like both messaging wise and just like policy wise, that if we're going to get some relevance back, if we're going to win against Trump and whoever comes after him, that we need to work on to make our movement not seem deranged and weird to the average American voter.
Right.
Thank you, Kevin.
I being there and before everything started, before everything popped off, I saw a lot of the people who were there early stream out of a senior living home. with their signs and everything. They were all revved up. And so it gave me early an idea of what this was going to be. And it didn't fail to show me exactly what I thought it would be, and I thought it was performative. And again, I'm resting on my experience in advocacy, demonstrations, and protests in the past. The message just didn't hit, and then the call to action. What was the call to action from this group? I don't know. And so, despite the shaming, the insults, the guilt tripping that this particular protest and its supporters, allies, and advocates have for those who are not, in the same camp as them, it just shows a deeper rift, especially hearing some of these answers. It shows a deeper rift in our society, period. And I want to thank you, Kellen, and you, Sean, for doing this. It was phenomenal. And, the questions, Sean, were spot on. The questioning was spot on. And it really elicited some true thoughts.
Thank you.
I guess I'll go next. Further to what Kevin says, I'm a non-party affiliate. I've never been a Democrat, but if I were held at gunpoint and told to register for a party, I'd probably be more likely to register for that one. Ideologically, I have more in common with. I have a lot of things in common with the No King protest. I don't like the way Donald Trump, like in a more administrative, brass tacks kind of way. I don't like the way he runs his government. I don't like the way he rewards government jobs. I don't like who he chooses to appoint to what positions. I don't like the way he handles the White House. I think Doge was unsuccessful his mission, yada yada. I have my issues with it. I don't like a lot of the tactics used. I don't like this hostility towards the press. But David's right. If there's no call to action, why do it? Like, what's the outcome to be seek? And I think literally they just wanted large numbers so that way you could brag on the news how many people don't support Trump. Because I think my ultimate theory is that they saw how, I think a lot of people on the left saw how important undercurrent was and how just pure social climate was to the 2024 election. Like, beyond just policy, it was like socially, what it was like to be a Harris supporter versus socially what it was like to be Trump supporter. I think they're kind of leaning into that tactic. And it's kind of an underhanded and kind of not useful tactic to employ anyways. But I wasn't very impressed ultimately with the effort. The numbers were impressive, but other than it fizzled out after that. I think it's important to hold your own side accountable. And actually that's advice I would also give to those conservatives that we spoke to. Why do people get the impression that you're against trans rights? Why is that the impression that is automatically given? I think it's because a lot of the messaging and a lot of the way that members of that crowd tend to conduct themselves gives that impression for the whole group. One bad apple, spoils the whole barrel. And I think it's important, whether it's we wanted the More Kings protest to be more serious, or we want to be more clear about what we actually support. Criticize your own side first. Clean up your own house first before just being at war with the other side all the time. You're going to accomplish more working from within an organization that might actually listen to you. And that's my final thought.
And I concur with everything that everybody has shared, and I'm so grateful for this conversation. I believe that we have had a great conversation and brought up many insights, and I learned a lot even just talking with you guys. I believe, with this, whenever you have such a large demonstration, the numbers are great, but if you're not proposing a solution, or at least something at the head to where these are actionable steps that we can take, then really, what is the point? Is this something that's just a celebration, a mockery, a social gathering, something, a farce? Like, what is your true intention here? Is it just a big pity party against Trump and your whole collective spirit in that? When I had asked a lot of these questions, and I said, well, what do you propose, or what would you like to be done? I mean, in case of ICE, what would you like to be done with ICE? And there was nothing really actionable or clear what they wanted to happen. It's just that orange man bad, this is no good, and no more. But something has to be done, or we don't have a country. And if we want to move steps in the right direction, hopefully we can have those answers. As soon as 12 o'clock hit, they were done, they were clocked out. And it was, I mean, in the messaging too, I mean, with fascism, and we went over this, of course, but you would feel that in such a dire circumstance that they're saying that we are living, proposing that we're living in, it would be something that was more serious. And I just didn't see that from this demonstration. I saw a lot of unseriousness and a lot of tomfoolery, to be honest with you. I'm glad we had some great conversations, but they were very surface level and very superficial. And if we were afforded the time and opportunity under different circumstances to have a deeper conversation, I think that could be great. We brought up a lot of great points here. But overall, it was something that I feel would be echoed across the country and other demonstrations. And it's more of just something that conservatives and MACA supporters can just point at and make fun of, rather than this sparking an actual dialogue and discourse in the future. The Trump administration is not affected by this. Trump is still in office, and so I don't know what their actual clear objective was with this protest. But I would like to thank Kellen for your amazing camera work and audio and editing work.
The camera work would have been amazing if I did the right settings, like a real prepared person. But I'm sorry.
No, but it was awesome. It was a lot to handle, and also your intellectual insights and your knowledge, and of course David for accompanying us and having your backing, supporting this. I'm very grateful, and this was a great opportunity for myself. I'm glad that we could all work on this together. And thank you to Kevin for joining us in this conversation. You brought up a lot of interesting points, a lot of points that I hadn't considered. And so I feel like that I learned a lot from this conversation. I probably learned a lot more about the No Kings and what they're about from our group than from talking with all the demonstrators. But regardless, I'm glad that we had this opportunity to discuss our experiences.
Never did that. Okay. David.
Thank you, everyone. Kellen, you want to send us out?
Yeah. If for some reason you actually watched all 2 hours and 15 minutes or however long, if I trim it back, which I might do, if you actually watched this to the end and you haven't liked, subscribed, and or contributed a thought in the comment, please do. We're small. We're a small group. We're local in Central Florida. We like to do real accurate reporting, and we like to give real solid insight beyond what you would see just on the average surface level news story. We want to provide more, and if you want to join us along that, we'd really appreciate it. With that, this has been the Jane Washington Network, and we are out.